to the world, while the unreasonable one tries to persist in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is dependent on the unreasonable man. Tonight I'm talking about Ross Ulbricht, the creator of the Silk Road website. I think that Ross is one of those unreasonable people that sees the world for not only what it is today, but the potential for what it can be. A more beautiful and loving place. Ross is a scientist. He got his undergrad at University of Texas at Dallas in physics on a full scholarship. Then he went on to Penn State on another full scholarship and got a master's in material sciences. While studying crystallography and preparing for his PhD, he came across the study of Austrian economics and liberty. This had a profound effect on Ross. It changed the course of his life. He said that on his LinkedIn profile page that just as slavery has been abolished almost everywhere, he believed that all forms of violence, coercion, and force from one person over another can also come to an end. That the most widespread and systemic use of force is amongst institutions and governments. He said that he is creating an economic simulation to give people a first-hand experience of what it's like to operate in a free market, one without the systemic use of force. The Silk Road started out as a peer-to-peer network for people to buy and sell pot. Coincidentally, pot was the first transaction ever recorded on the internet. In 1971 or 72, these damn hippies can't keep their dates straight, students at Stanford bought pot from students at MIT in the first recorded transaction over the internet. The most well-known goods sold on the Silk Road included drugs and identification documents. Goods that had the intent or explicit purpose to harm or defraud someone, like child pornography, assassinations, stolen credit cards, and weapons of mass destruction, were strictly forbidden. The government didn't like this. They arrested Ross in 2013, took him to trial, and convicted him of money laundering, computer hacking, and conspiracy to traffic narcotics. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for running a website. The trial took place in the land of injustice, a place where the perversion of law runs rampant. You guys may know it as New York. It's a place where a state official can murder a citizen on the street, like the case of Eric Gardner, and not suffer any legal recourse. But if a citizen wishes to acquire a plant and ingest it, well, you see, that's not allowed. The state of New York is so authoritarian that we only need one lesson from history to understand the destruction and damage to human life the state of New York is capable of inflicting on the public. Frustrated that citizens continued to purchase and consume booze during alcohol prohibition, the state of New York thought it was a good idea to add poison to alcohol produced in the United States. The idea or the intent, which so many people argue in favor of related to government programs, was to scare people. Some of the notable poisons used over the next 7 years included kerosene, benzene, gasoline, iodine, zinc, nicotine, ether, formaldehyde, chloroform, camphor, carbolic acid, quinine, and acetone. Now I know you guys are thinking, well, that's not enough. Or at least the New York Treasury Department was saying that much. They were so opposed to people breaking prohibition laws that they demanded that methyl alcohol be added to the alcohol, increasing the deadly effects. Rather than scare away healthy citizens from consuming an illicit beverage, the program killed over 10,000 Americans. The New York City chief medical examiner during the 1920s, Charles Norris, said it was the nation's experiment in extermination. In the spirit of tradition, the program had a disproportionate effect on minorities and the poorest communities. I'm talking about a time when my grandparents were alive. Had my grandparents been drinkers at the time, the state of New York would have tried to poison them. Had I been around at the time, well, I could probably tell you what chloroform tastes like. The state of New York preyed upon the most vulnerable in our society. So when an institution like this, that has a history of believing it's okay to poison innocent people, describes Ross as a criminal, I believe the only reasonable response is one of suspicion. But Ross isn't a vulnerable member of society. Quite the contrary. Ross said that over the next 20 years he wanted to have a substantial positive impact on the future of humanity. Ross was brave enough to risk his freedom for the freedom of others, and I'll explain that in a minute, but he was punished excessively for doing so. As I was researching Ross, I just got this image of him. He's like, over here, like, oh, hey guys, look at me. I'm this handsome, smart scientist that's gonna have a substantial positive impact on the future of humanity. And then he does it. While I'm looking at him, I'm like, gosh, Ross, like, my goals for tomorrow are to remember to wear pants and don't get hit by a bus. The more I researched Ross, the more I felt inadequate about myself. But tonight, I'm going to eat my inadequate feelings, and that's on Ross. The Greek poet Archilochus said that we do not rise to the level of our expectations, but we fall to the level of our training. I think there's a similar lesson regarding freedom, that we maintain the level of freedom that we exercise. Ross showed people how beautiful a more free world can be, but it came at a great cost. Albert Einstein said that great spirits have always encountered opposition from mediocre minds. The mediocre mind is incapable of understanding the man who refuses to bow blindly to conventional prejudices and chooses instead to express his opinions courageously and honestly. If that doesn't define Ross and his story, I don't know what does. The Silk Road was a technology that represented the freedom to travel and the freedom to explore. As libertarians, we believe that everyone is born with the God-given right to leave, that no one can stop you. You are not confined to the space you grew up in. Your impact on this world is not predefined for you. The issue of staying or leaving is of fundamental importance, and no place can be described as the land of the free if people are restricted from leaving. The Silk Road provided everyone with that freedom that I believe you are born with, even though some people try to take it away. The second freedom the Silk Road offered was the freedom to explore. Marijuana and psychedelics accounted for over 75% of the drugs sold on the Silk Road. Now the case for marijuana legalization, I think, is settled. There no longer exists someone that opposes legalization that can articulate an intelligent argument. A couple of years ago, my grandmother, who I call Bubby, in the Jewish tradition, we call our grandparents Bubby and Zadie. A couple years ago, my Bubby sat me down and said, "Elliott, I'm concerned about you." I said, "Okay." She said, I heard that marijuana causes autism.
Well, you already got it, so who cares?
I said, Bubby, thanks for your concern, I'm okay. But that's the truth. You're not going to find an intelligent argument against the legalization of marijuana. According to data collected from the FBI, last year police arrested more people for pot possession alone than all violent crimes combined. We can discern from this that the fastest way to reduce violent crime would be to legalize, to end prohibition, and reallocate resources for law enforcement for actually stopping violent crime. The principle that we own our own bodies, indivisibly and unequivocally, cannot be understated. With the use of psychedelics, the Silk Road offered individuals the freedom to explore. I like what James Fadiman says about the psychedelic experience. He's a Stanford-educated entheogenic psychologist. He says, I'm for freedom. There should be nothing that restricts a human being from being closer to God. There should be nothing that prevents a human being from discovering the majesty and beauty of this world through science. And there should be nothing that interrupts or prevents a human being from discovering who you really are. He says that's where psychedelics are most useful. He summarizes it beautifully and not without warning. He says that no civilization is going to continue to progress if it prevents its people from science, spirituality, and self-exploration. The world is a sobering place. There are a great many tragedies that occur every day. Many of them are out of humanity's control. The state of nature can be unforgiving. If you've seen the movie Gravity, it's terrifying. That's what I imagine the state of nature to be like. But there are still a great many tragedies that occur every day as the result of conscious human action. No reasonable person should tolerate a continuation of such action. With this in mind, I think it's more often than not improper to cast judgment on how others seek happiness. Our ability to remain tolerant of others while we hold different opinions on the pursuance of life, liberty, and happiness defines us as humans. I'm not an advocate for anyone to use anything incorrectly, as we all know well that anything in life can be abused. I'm an advocate for freedom. Ross Ulbricht traded his freedom for the freedom of others. Had the Silk Road been available during alcohol prohibition, it could have saved thousands of lives. Ross Ulbricht isn't going to spend the rest of his life in prison. I think that the people of tomorrow will have better access to the information of today. The truth of the injustice Ross received will come out. Given the laws of probability, I believe that Ross has a chance to be seen before a judge with a legitimate sense of justice. Given the direction of progress in the world, I believe that sooner rather than later, Ross will be seen as the hero that he is. Words written so beautifully, I wish to copy them. The co-founder of Liberty on the Rocks, Justin Longo, wrote that Ross is a hero for having the courage to provide a better way. Ross is a hero for inspiring others to look into liberty's rich tradition. Ross is a hero for proving that peaceful exchange does not require top-down command and control. That is, that the beauty of this world is predicated on peaceful interactions, voluntary relationships, and the absolute respect for the individual. Finally, Ross is a hero for doing what most of us can't stomach doing. Living our principles every single day. I invite all of you to go to freeross.org and lend your support. We need to help Ross so that Ross can help the world. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, if you'll raise your glass.
Yeah, we'll do a toast to Ross real quick.
To making the world a better, healthier, safer, and more loving place. To Ross Ulbricht.
Oh, what is that? Non-IPA. All right. Questions. Let's do questions. Anybody have questions about Ross? Johnny.
Where's the new Silk Road? Where can I go to get drugs now?
There's over 30 competitors actively online right now in the dark net. I'm not an advocate for anyone explicitly, but last I checked, as of 48 hours ago, there were over 30 competitors. So even though they locked Ross in prison for the rest of his life for what they tried to do, they haven't reduced the distribution of drugs at all.
Questions? Matt.
How would you send Ross a care package if you wanted to?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, how can we send Ross a care package or mail? The best answer is we'll put online his mailing address on this Facebook page. Excuse me. And that's the easiest. If you want to mail Ross a package, the easiest way to do it is to purchase it on Amazon. I don't think you can send Ross books or packages unless they're from Amazon or a related affiliate.
Gabe's in care. Gabe first, go.
What was Ross's thought process for shutting down the armory? I understand he was selling drugs. That guns were available on the Silk Road for a while, and then they were taken off. Do you know about that, or what the thought process was for taking the guns off the Silk Road?
Yeah, the question is, what was the thought process behind removing guns from the Silk Road and then adding them back in? I'm not familiar with that piece of the puzzle. I don't want to theorize because I don't have the information to answer that question.
I just wanted to add, so if you want to write to Ross in the package, I know Lynn had some special instructions about positivity. Can you just talk about that really quick? Did you hear this? That Lynn his mom has requested that any letters he writes to him stay really positive and don't wallow in the negative. That he needs positivity and good things right now and not negative things.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but I've spoken with Lynn Ulbricht a couple times over the last few weeks. She's an awfully sweet, kind, and generous woman. I think that this is a travesty of justice, a tragedy for the world, because locking away one of your brightest, best minds is not the way for progress. And yeah, I imagine that a family that's going through something like this probably struggles with seeing light going forward. And so when you do send Ross letters and support, make sure you express our love for him and our appreciation for his stance on liberty and making the world a healthier and better place.
More questions? You already answered. Tom.
Yeah, anybody else that's in prison without murdering somebody for the rest of their life? Is there any other state, is he the only one that's in there that has no violence whatsoever, yet he's in prison for the rest of his life?
The question is there anyone else in prison that's there, committed to prison for the rest of their life without having murdered someone or taken extremely violent action? Someone's saying Sarah Brown.
Barrett Brown.
Barrett Brown. But I imagine that
Peter Schiff's dad. Peter Schiff's dad.
Peter Schiff's father.
Peter Schiff's dad died in jail for tax evasion.
Erwin Schiff. I imagine it's more than we would expect, unfortunately.
Any other? Who hasn't asked a question yet? Questions? 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 I have a question. Do you think Ross would have been a member of Liberty on the Rocks?
Do I think Ross would have been a member at Liberty on the Rocks? Yeah, I think he'd be all about Liberty on the Rocks. I think he's all about that Austrian economics and liberty.
All right, that's good to know. Leif.
What was Ross's introduction to Austrian school thinking?
Repeat that.
What was Ross's introduction to Austrian school thinking? In 2007 and 2008, he was preparing for his PhD program. I don't know his exact exposure to it, but he had a picture of Ron Paul in 2008 as a Ron Paul delegate and supporter. I think that he came across the work of Mises and Rothbard and Hayek, and that inspired his change of direction.
Any other questions? Josh.
So what do you think about the murder accusations against Ross? Number one, did he do it? Two, if he did, was it justified? And I believe he's going to court a few months before that. Do you think he has any chance of beating that? And how do you think that might affect his current case with Silk Road directly?
The question is about the murder for hire charges. Do I think that Ross committed the murder for hire accusations that they claimed? Was he justified in doing so? And what's it like? What's the outcome of this storyline likely to conclude? That's a good question, Josh. Glad you asked. I didn't include it in my talk because the more I researched it, the more it became like the tabloids. It's bullshit, and most people that study it know it's bullshit. The people on the prosecution can't say so, but their actions speak louder than their words. So there's a lot to unravel here, and I think it's important to give it a fair shot. The evidence that was brought forth about the murder for hire accusations, it's digital evidence, it's screenshots of a chat log of Dread Pirate Roberts saying things like, "Let's take this guy out." The evidence was provided by corrupt agents, Carl Force and Sean Bridges. These were two agents on the Silk Road case that are currently under investigation and facing criminal charges for being thieves, stealing government property, and also blackmailing users on the Silk Road. These agents had access to the account that they have screenshots of. So there's a couple problems. One, it's digital evidence. I can pay someone on Fiverr $5 to create a screenshot of a chat log with someone's username on a date that I wish, and they will perform that task. If I had access to the account, then I don't need to pay someone $5 because I can recreate it myself. None of the murder for hire charges actually led to any murders, but it did lead to other consequences. The murder for hire charges were included in the indictment to arrest Ross, but they were not pursued in trial. That action alone speaks to the volume of how unconfident the prosecution is at pursuing those claims, those allegations. But it was used to deny Ross bail and keep him in solitary confinement for the first 6 weeks that he was arrested. There's also two other forces at work. those murder for hire charges were brought into court and shared with the jury. I think it was Mark Twain that said, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they have been fooled. When you're giving the jury information, whether it's true or not, it's going to influence their behavior. So now you're already tipping the scale of justice in an unequal way. There's also another quote, I'm not sure who it's by, but it says that the magnitude of the energy level required to refute bullshit is on the order of magnitude higher than it was necessary to produce it. So you're tipping the scale away from the defense and also increasing their burden of work in trying to help the jurors understand the truth of the case. Oh, okay, so there's also the point of what was said in the chat logs. Does it speak to Ross's writing style? They're absurd. In 2013, when these chat logs are allegedly shown for, one of the murder for hire allegations that shows the writing of DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, they had been hacked, or they had an inside theft job. Money was stolen from the Silk Road for about $150,000. At the time they had made 60, 70 million. But Dread Pirate Roberts said, it makes him sick to his stomach that someone would take that money from them, and that they need to be dealt with swiftly, and they need to murder them. When you follow the narrative of the state trying to pin this murder for hire charge, these murder for hire charges on Ross, when in reality, Ross was in San Francisco playing frisbee in the park, participating in drum circles, reading Austrian economics and preaching about nonviolence. It's hard to imagine this duplicity of this person being so friendly and forthright and honest in person, and then going online as a sinister, evil, conniving drug lord that just flips a switch and says, nah man, I'm gonna murder you. You took money from me? That doesn't fly. It's I think it's ludicrous, and the real story here about the murder for hire charges is how often does a prosecution team use this tactic of tipping the scale of justice in an unfair way, where if they were actually to explore these murder for hire charges, it would expose their wrongdoings in the courtroom. That's my belief.
Any other questions? Questions? Anybody? No? Going once? Oh. Kiara and Josh, what? We got a team question now?
Same time. Just because you mentioned DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, can you explain to the crowd like what the connotations are behind that name?
Yeah, Dread Pirate Roberts. One of the most lovable fictional characters from The Princess Bride. Dread Pirate Roberts is a moniker that's passed down from person to person running the ship that they were on, where they would go and perform pirate behavior. Not exactly what Ross is doing, but the Dread Pirate Roberts, Wesley, in the movie The Princess Bride, was actually the hero. You know, it wasn't his actions that established the reputation for him, but it was the moniker that established the reputation for him. And the government never established whether or not there was one Dread Pirate Roberts or a dozen Dread Pirate Roberts. I think it would be against their best interest to try and discover that, but it's been evident, or it's been made evident that the corrupt agents as well as other agents gained access to the Dread Pirate Roberts account and other Silk Road managers of the website accounts and servers in early 2013. And so all of the evidence that they brought forth in trial, they had access to manipulate. Yeah.
All right, final one, anyone? No? All right, give it up for Elliott.